Section 2 of Ulysses. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Ulysses by James Joyce, Part 1, The Telemachade. Episode 1, Telemachus, Part 2. The doorway was darkened by an entering form. "The milk, sir." "Come in, ma'am," Mulligan said. "Kinch, get the jug." An old woman came forward and stood by Stephen's elbow. "That's a lovely morning, sir," she said. "Glory be to God." "To whom?" Mulligan said, glancing at her. "Ah, to be sure." Stephen reached back and took the milk jug from the locker. "The islanders," Mulligan said to Haines casually, "speak frequently of the collector of prepuces." "How much, sir?" asked the old woman. "A quart," Stephen said. He watched her pour into the measure and thence into the jug rich white milk, not hers, old shrunken paps. She poured again, a measureful and a tilly. Old and secret, she had entered from a morning world, maybe a messenger. She praised the goodness of the milk, pouring it out. Crouching by a patient cow at daybreak in a lush field, a witch on her toadstool, her wrinkled fingers quick at the squirting dugs. They lowed about her whom they knew, dew silky cattle, Silk of the Kine and poor old woman, names given her in old times. A wandering crone, lowly form of an immortal serving her conqueror and her gay betrayer, their common Cuckwian, a messenger from her secret morning. To serve or to upbraid, whether he could not tell, but scorned to beg her favor. "It is indeed, ma'am," Buck Mulligan said, pouring milk into their cups. "Taste it, sir," she said. He drank at her bidding. "If we could live on good food like that," he said to her somewhat loudly, "we wouldn't have the country full of rotten teeth and rotten guts. Living in a bog swamp, eating cheap food, and the streets paved with dust, horse dung, and consumptive spits." "Are you a medical student, sir?" the old woman asked. "I am, ma'am," Buck Mulligan answered. "Look at that now," she said. Stephen listened in a scornful silence. She bows her old head to a voice that speaks to her loudly, her bone setter, her medicine man. Me she slights. To the voice that will shrive and oil for the grave all there is of her but her woman's unclean loins of a man's flesh made not in God's kindness, the serpent's prey. And to the loud voice that now bids her be silent with wandering unsteady eyes. "Do you understand what she says?" Stephen asked her. "Is it French you're talking, sir?" the old woman said to Haines. Haines spoke to her again in longer speech, confidently. "Irish," Buck Mulligan said. "Is there Gaelic on you?" "I thought it was Irish," she said, "by the sound of it." "Are you from the West, sir?" "I'm an Englishman," Haines answered. "He's English," Buck Mulligan said, "and he thinks we ought to speak Irish in Ireland." "Sure we ought to," the old woman said, "and I'm ashamed I don't speak the language myself. I'm told it's a grand language by them that knows." "Grand is no name for it," said Buck Mulligan. "Wonderful entirely. Fill us out some more tea, Kinch. Would you like a cup, ma'am?" "No, thank you, sir," the old woman said, slipping the ring of the milk can on her forearm and about to go. Haines said to her, "Have you your bill? We'd better pay her, Mulligan, hadn't we?" Stephen filled again the 3 cups. "Bill, sir," she said, halting. "Well, it's 7 mornings a pint at 2 pence is 7 twos is a shilling and 2 pence over, and these 3 mornings a quart at 4 pence is 3 quarts is a shilling. That's a shilling and 1 and 2 is 2 and 2, sir." Buck Mulligan sighed, and having filled his mouth with a crust thickly buttered on both sides, stretched forth his legs and began to search his trouser pockets. "Pay up and look pleasant," Haines said to him, smiling. Stephen filled a 3rd cup, a spoonful of tea coloring faintly the thick, rich milk. Buck Mulligan brought up a florin, twisted round his fingers, and cried, "A miracle!" He passed it along the table towards the old woman, saying, "Ask nothing more of me, sweet. All I can give you, I give." Stephen laid the coin in her uneager hand. "We'll owe you 2 pence," he said. "Time enough, sir," she said, taking the coin. "Time enough. Good morning, sir." She curtsied and went out, followed by Buck Mulligan's tender chant. "Heart of my heart, were it more, more would be laid at your feet." He turned to Stephen and said, "Seriously, Daedalus, I'm stony. Hurry out to your old school, Kip, and bring us back some money. Today the bards must drink and junket. Ireland expects that every man this day will do his duty." "That reminds me," Haines said, rising, "that I have to visit your National Library today." "Our swim first," Buck Mulligan said. He turned to Stephen and asked blandly, "Is this the day of your monthly wash, Kinch?" Then to Haines, "The unclean bard makes a point of washing once a month." "All Ireland is washed by the Gulf Stream," Stephen said, as he let honey trickle over the slice of loaf. Haines, from the corner where he was knotting easily a scarf about the loose collar of his tennis shirt, spoke. "I intend to make a collection of your sayings, if you will let me." "Speaking to me. They wash and tub and scrub. Agan bite and inwit. Conscience. Yet here's a spot. That one about the cracked looking-glass of a servant being the symbol of Irish art is deuced good." Buck Mulligan kicked Stephen's foot under the table and said with warmth of tone, "Wait till you hear him on Hamlet, Haines." "Well, I mean it," Haines said, still speaking to Stephen. "I was just thinking of it when that poor old creature came in." "Would I make any money by it?" Stephen asked. Haines laughed, and, as he took his soft gray hat from the holdfast of the hammock, said, "I don't know, I'm sure." He strolled out of the doorway. Buck Mulligan bent across to Stephen and said with coarse vigor, "You put your hoof in it now. What did you say that for?" "Well," Stephen said, "the problem is to get money. From whom? From the milkwoman or from him? It's a toss-up, I think." "I blow him out about you," Buck Mulligan said, "and then you come along with your lousy leer and your gloomy Jesuit jibes." "I see little hope," Stephen said, "from her or from him." Buck Mulligan sighed tragically and laid his hand on Stephen's arm. "From me, Kinch," he said. In a suddenly changed tone, he added, "To tell you the God's truth, I think you're right. Damn all else they are good for. Why don't you play them as I do? To hell with them all. Let us get out of the kip." He stood up, gravely ungirdled, and disrobed himself of his gown, saying resignedly, "Mulligan is stripped of his garments." He emptied his pockets onto the table. "There's your snot rag," he said, and putting on his stiff collar and rebellious tie, he spoke to them, chiding them into his dangling watch-chain. His hands plunged and rummaged in his trunk while he called for a clean handkerchief. "God, we'll simply have to dress the character. I want puce gloves and green boots. Contradiction. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then, I contradict myself. Mercurial Malachi." A limp black missile flew out of his talking hands. "And there's your Latin Quarter hat," he said. Stephen picked it up and put it on. Haines called to them from the doorway, "Are you coming, you fellows?" "I'm ready," Buck Mulligan answered, going towards the door. "Come out, Kinch." "You have eaten all we left, I suppose." Resigned, he passed out, with grave words and gait, saying well nigh with sorrow, "And going forth he met Butterfly." Stephen, taking his ash-plant from its leaning-place, followed them out, and as they went down the ladder, pulled to the slow iron door and locked it. He put the huge key in his inner pocket. At the front of the ladder, Buck Mulligan asked, "Did you bring the key?" "I have it," Stephen said, preceding them. He walked on. Behind him he heard Buck Mulligan club with his heavy bath-towel the leader shoots of ferns and grasses. "Down, sir." "How dare you, sir?" Haines asked. "Do you pay rent for this tower?" 12 quid, Buck Mulligan said. "To the Secretary of State for War," Stephen added over his shoulders. They halted while Haines surveyed the tower and said at last, "Rather bleak in winter time, I would say. Martello, you call it?" "Billy Pitt had them built," Buck Mulligan said, "when the French were on the sea. But ours is the Omphalos." "What is your idea of Hamlet?" Haines asked Stephen. No, Buck Mulligan shouted in pain. "I'm not equal to Thomas Aquinas and my 55 reasons he has made out to prop it up. Wait till I have a few pints in me first." He turned to Stephen, saying, as he pulled down neatly the peaks of his primrose waistcoat, "You couldn't manage it under 3 pints, Kinch, could you?" "It has waited so long," Stephen said listlessly. "It can wait longer." "You pique my curiosity," Haines said amiably. "Is it some paradox?" "Pooh," Buck Mulligan said. "We have grown out of Wilde and paradoxes. It's quite simple. He proves by algebra that Hamlet's grandson is Shakespeare's grandfather, and that he himself is the ghost of his own father." "What?" Haines said, beginning to point at Stephen. "He himself?" Buck Mulligan slung his towel stolewise round his neck, and bending in loose laughter, he said in Stephen's ear, "Oh, shade of Kinch the elder, Japhet in search of a father." "We're always tired in the morning," Stephen said to Haines, "and it is rather long to tell." Buck Mulligan, walking forward again, raised his hands. "The sacred pint alone can unbind the tongue of Daedalus," he said. "I mean to say," Haines explained to Stephen as they followed, "this tower and these cliffs here remind me somehow of Elsinore. That beetles o'er his base into the sea, isn't it?" Buck Mulligan turned suddenly for an instant towards Stephen, but he did not speak. In the bright silent instant Stephen saw his own image in cheap dusty mourning between the gay attires. "It's a wonderful tale," Haines said, bringing them to a halt again. Eyes, pale as the sea, and the wind had freshened paler, firm and prudent. The sea's ruler, he gazed southward over the bay, empty save for the smoking plume of the mail boat vague on the bright skyline and a sail tacking by the Muglins. "I read a theological interpretation of it somewhere," he said, bemused. "The father and the son idea, the son striving to be atoned with the father." Buck Mulligan at once put on a blithe, broadly smiling face. He looked at them, his well-shaped mouth opened happily, his eyes, from which he had suddenly withdrawn all shrewd sense, blinking with mad gaiety. He moved a doll's head to and fro, the brims of his Panama hat quivering, and began to chant in a quiet, happy, foolish voice. "I'm the queerest young fellow that you've ever heard. My mother's a Jew, my father's a bird. With Joseph the joiner I cannot agree. So here's to disciples and cavalry." He held up a forefinger of warning. "If anyone thinks that I ain't divine, he'll get no free drinks when I'm making the wine, but have to drink water and wish it were plain that I make when the wine becomes water again." He tugged swiftly at Stephen's ash plant in farewell, and running forward to a brow of the cliff, fluttered his hands at his sides like fins or wings of one about to rise in the air, and chanted, "Goodbye now, goodbye. Write down all I said, and tell Tom, Dick, and Harry I rose from the dead. What's bred in the bone cannot fail me to fly, and Olivet's breezy. Goodbye now, goodbye." He capered before them down towards the 40-foot hole, fluttering his wing-like hands, leaping nimbly, Mercury's hat quivering in the fresh wind that bore back to them his brief bird-sweet cries. Haines, who had been laughing guardedly, walked on beside Stephen and said, "We oughtn't to laugh, I suppose. He's rather blasphemous. I'm not a believer myself, that is to say. Still, his gaiety takes the harm out of it somehow, doesn't it? What did he call it? Joseph the joiner?" "The Ballad of Joking Jesus," Stephen answered. "Oh," Haines said, "you have heard it before." "3 times a day, after meals," Stephen said dryly. "You're not a believer, are you?" Haines asked. "I mean, a believer in the narrow sense of the word. Creation from nothing and miracles and a personal God." "There's only one sense of the word, it seems to me," Stephen said. Haines stopped to take out a smooth silver case in which twinkled a green stone. He sprang it open with his thumb and offered it. "Thank you," Stephen said, taking a cigarette. Haines helped himself and snapped the case to. He put it back in his side pocket and took from his waist pocket a nickel tinder box, sprang it open too, and having lit his cigarette, held the flaming spunk towards Stephen in the shell of his hands. "Yes, of course," he said, as they went out again. "Either you believe or you don't, isn't it? Personally, I couldn't stomach the idea of a personal God. You don't stand for that, I suppose?" "You behold in me," Stephen said with grim displeasure, "a horrible example of free thought." He walked on, waiting to be spoken to, trailing his ash plant by his side. Its ferule followed lightly on the path, squealing at his heels. My familiar after me calling, "Stephen," a wavering line along the path. "They will walk on it tonight, coming here in the dark. He wants that key. It's mine. I paid the rent. Now I ate his salt bread. Give him the key, too, all. He will ask for it." That was in his eyes. "After all," Haines began. Stephen turned and saw the cold gaze which had measured him was not all unkind. "After all, I should think you are able to free yourself. You are your own master, it seems to me." "I am a servant of 2 masters," Stephen said, "an English and an Italian." "Italian?" Haines said. "A crazy queen, old and jealous, kneeled down before me." "And a third," Stephen said, "there is, who wants me for odd jobs." "Italian?" Haines said again. "What do you mean?" "The Imperial British State," Stephen answered, his color rising in the Holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church. Haines detached from his underlip some fibers of tobacco before he spoke. "I can quite understand that," he said calmly. "An Irishman must think like that, I dare say. We feel in England that we have treated you rather unfairly. It seems history is to blame. The proud, potent titles clanged over Stephen's memory, the triumph of their brazen bells. Et unum sanctum Catholicum et apostolicarum ecclesiam. The slow growth and the change of rite and dogma like his own rare thoughts, a chemistry of stars. Symbols of the apostles in the Mass for Pope Marcellus. The voices blended, singing alone, loud in affirmation. And behind their chant, the vigilant angel of the Church, militant, disarmed, and menaced her heresiarchs. A horde of heresies fleeing with mitres awry, Photius and the brood of mockers of whom Mulligan was one, and Arius, warring his life long upon the consubstantiality of the Son and the Father, and Valentine spurning Christ's terrene body, and the subtle African heresiarch Sabellius, who held that the Father was himself his own Son. Words Mulligan had spoken a moment since in mockery to the stranger. Idle mockery. The void awaits, surely, all them that weave the wind, a menace, a disarming and a worsening from those embattled angels of the Church, Michael's host, who defend forever in the hour of conflict with their lances and their shields. Hear, hear! Prolonged applause. Zut, nom de Dieu! Of course I'm a Britisher, Haynes' voices said, and I feel as one. I don't want to see my country fall into the hands of the German Jews, either. That's our national problem, I'm afraid, just now. Two men stood at the verge of the cliff, watching. Businessmen, boatmen. She's making for Bullock Harbor. The boatman nodded towards the north of the bay with some disdain. There's 5 fathoms out there, he said. I'd be swept up that way when the tide comes in about 1. It's 9 days today. The men that was drowned. A sail veering about the blank bay, waiting for a stolen bundle to bob up, roll over to the sun, a puffy face, salt white. Here I am. They followed the winding path down the creek. Buck Mulligan stood on a stone, in shirt-sleeves, his unclipped tie rippling over his shoulder. A young man, clinging to a spur of a rock near him, moved slowly, frog-wise, his green legs in the deep jelly of the water. "Is your brother with you, Malachi?" "Down in Westmeath, with the Bannons." "Still there?" "I got a card from Bannon. Says he found a sweet young thing down there. Photo girl, he calls her." "Snapshot, eh?" Brief exposure. Buck Mulligan sat down to unlace his boots. An elderly man shot up near the spur of rock, a blowing red face. He scrambled up by the stones, water glistening on his pate and on his garland of his gray hair, water reeling over his chest and paunch and spilling jets out of his black sagging loincloth. Buck Mulligan made way for him to scramble past, and glancing at Haynes and Stephen, crossed himself piously with his thumbnail at brow and lips and breastbone. "Seymour's back in town," the young man said, grasping again his spur of rock. "Chucked medicine and going in for the army." "Ah, go to God," Buck Mulligan said. "Going over next week to stew. You know that Red Carlisle girl, Lily?" "Yes. Spooning with him last night on the pier. The father is wrought with money." "Is she up the pole?" "Better ask Seymour that." "Seymour, a bleeding officer," Buck Mulligan said. He nodded to himself as he drew off his trousers and stood up, saying tritely, "Red-headed woman buck like goats." He broke off in alarm, feeling his side under the flapping shirt. "My 12th rib is gone," he cried. "I'm the Übermensch, Toothless Kinch, and I, the Superman." He struggled out of his shirt and flung it behind him to where his clothes lay. "Are you going in there, Malachi?" "Yes, make room in the bed." The young man shoved himself backwards through the water and reached the middle of the creek in 2 long, clean strokes. Haynes sat down on a stone, smoking. "Are you not coming in?" Buck Mulligan asked. "Later on," Haynes said. "Not on my breakfast." Stephen turned away. "I'm going, Mulligan," he said. "Give us that key, Kinch," Buck Mulligan said, "to keep my chemise flat." Stephen handed him the key. Buck Mulligan laid it across his heaped clothes. "And 2 pence," he said, "for a pint. Throw it here." Stephen threw 2 pennies on the soft heap. Dressing, undressing, Buck Mulligan erect, with joined hands before him, said solemnly, "He who stealeth from the poor lendeth to the Lord. Thus spake Zarathustra." His plump body plunged. "We'll see you again," Haynes said, turning as Stephen walked up the path and smiling at Wild Irish. "Horn of a bull, hoof of a horse, smile of a Saxon. "The ship," Buck Mulligan cried. "half-12." "Good," Stephen said. He walked along the upward curving path. "Liliata rutilantium turma circumdet, ubi elantium te Virginium." The priest's gray nimbus in a niche where he dressed discreetly. "I will not sleep here tonight. Home also I cannot go." A voice, sweetened and sustained, called him from the sea. Turning the curve, he waved his hand. It called again. A sleek brown head, a seal's, far out on the water, round. Usurper. End of section 2.